Hello and welcome to this panel, which is creating a script and editing for comics. My name is Ty, Black and Culture, but more importantly, today I have the two most amazing women in sequential art. I have Miss Stephanie
Hey.
Williams. I'm going to give them a moment to introduce themselves because I don't want to overtalk them. I could gab about her all day. And then I have Natosha Jones as well. Hello, ladies. How are you?
Good.
You're here.
We're here. Right? So for those who may not be super familiar with your work, starting with you, Natasha, can you tell me more about what you do in the world of comics and manga?
I am the co-founder and co-owner of Midnight Comics that I own with my husband. I am also the one of the writers and the lead editor on staff and have also edited a couple of books for Concrete Comics.
Yes, we love that. Also, aren't you an award winning editor?
I
Got it,
always
got it.
forget that. I'm sorry. I apologize. So award-winning editor thanks to the book Kandaki by Anaji.
Mm,
Yes.
A good book too.
very, very good book. And then for you, Stephanie, for people who may not be familiar with you and your work, please tell us what are your accomplishments in the world of comics and manga?
Um, so I guess responsible for a lot of X-Men memes that are roaming around the internet. Uh, and then from there, Living Hero, so Living Single meets Marvel, and bringing Nubia back from obscurity because she was deep down in the DC basement. But I've done some of everything, from My Little Pony to Peter Parker Spider-Man. I just love storytelling. I've even written a light novel for Saturday AM based on White Manga's Apple Black. But I'm here. I'm here to have a good time.
Yes. I think a lot of people when they first approach comics and manga, for a long time, especially up until maybe the last 5 years, there was almost kind of like a look down on the comics and manga industry. There was very much a big separation between prose books, or what most people call novels. I call them books, and comic books. But I'm sure you ladies are both aware. In the world of comics and manga and graphic novels, there is a specific kind of talent that is required to write for panels. So the first question I have for you ladies is, how do you approach when you are making a story into a comic? How do you approach taking your concept and then turning that into a comic book?
You want to go first?
Okay. So for me, I started in a completely different realm. I started with poetry and prose novels, and my intro to script writing was theater scripts because I went to school for theater, which also a lot of people don't know. I actually minored in English as well. Um, so I was like, yeah, it's kind of the same, right? It's a little different. So I'm going to outline the story from beginning to end. And once I have that, then I start on my individual rough draft for the individual issues. Then I go back and actually script them properly, if I can say. I think Stephanie actually put a comment on Cammy's post on Threads the other day, and I liked what you said when she was talking about scripting, how basically there's no one right way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
No.
And so you got to do what's comfortable for you.
Hmm.
And definitely had to learn that along the way. I'm more comfortable with theater scripts. So mine do definitely go a little more along the theater script route, but I implemented some of the more traditional comic book script writing in with it to make it easier for the artist to understand, because most artists will understand a certain kind of script writing, and as long as my artist gets it, then I'm happy. As long as they know what I'm trying to get across, then I'm happy with it.
And then for you, Stephanie?
Yeah, I mean, very similar. My background is in research science. So for me, a lot of my ideas are born out of either something that I am just either researching and then I've gotten like really stuck on it and I've gone down this rabbit hole. For instance, let me give an example so that'll work. So for Living Heroes, for example, I was rereading the Phoenix Saga and also rewatching or really watching for the very first time all the way through Living Single because Hulu has like finally had it streaming. And while doing that, I was rereading the Phoenix Saga for something totally different, but I came across Misty Knight and Jean Grey being roommates. And that got me to thinking, I was like, well, damn, she dies. So like, who's going to help Misty with rent? And it just kind of turned into this thing where I started to ask myself, okay, well, if Misty needed a new roommate, but she ended up getting one. It was like a model. But if we do something a little bit more fun, who could she move in with? And I knew for a long time I had been wanting to write women and, Black women and their friendships in comics because we don't really see a lot of Black women superheroes, just interact with one another on the same page. So I thought about Storm and her ties to Harlem thanks to her dad. And I was like, oh, Misty can move in with Storm. And Monica Rambeau will be there simply because I love Monica Rambeau and she does remind me of Khadijah and She-Hulk, not just because she's a lawyer, but there are a lot of similarities in personality to her and Max. And there was the idea, great idea, but it's always the execution. So for me at the time, it was trying to tell stories in one page because that's essentially what I did when I was making memes, but it was reduced to a tweet. So just building upon that, I thought about how I went about, memeing, which to me was kind of similar to comic writing, just that the panels were already there and I had to build a story around that. That is how I approach comic scripting since then. I get my idea, I outline it the same, and from there, I guess taking like the analytical portion of it, I figure out what the structure looks like for the story. So I'll actually take my outline and I'll do something where I'll group a certain passage and I'll say, oh, this might fit on pages 1 through 4 and so on and so forth. And then from there, I'll even further break it down, like what will work best for a splash page. Which for the folks that don't know what that is literally just a page in the comic that's dedicated to usually showing one action, but it's kind of like a glorified cover on the inside and the part of the story. And then your double page spread can look a multitude of ways, but essentially it's one big picture. Or you can, do cool stuff like have multiple action and kind of weave through. But doing that has helped a lot, especially because I'm usually writing multiple projects at the same time. It helps me keep things in order. And also, I don't know, it makes the revision process a lot easier when my editor comes back to me or before I even send it off to the editor, I'm able to edit myself to hopefully, get rid of the silly stuff that I missed. And I'm like, I want you to call me back. So let me get rid of some of this stuff.
I absolutely adore the different approaches to like the technical side of script writing. Tashi, hitting on what you had said earlier, script writing from a theater aspect. Also, I'm not a theater kid. I'm not deep in the theater kid like you. Oh, not the look.
I know things about her. Know things. I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna let it go.
But I also come from that script writing standpoint of like taking like the way that you would read a play script with the stage directions, but also in doing my own editing as well. I realized that some of the most interesting script writing does come when you kind of operate with the artist in mind, because that's 50% of why you're writing the script is you're writing, of course, to storytell, but you're also writing because your other teammate, who your artist is, has to be able to know what you're trying to convey. And then, of course, I love that you bring in some of that jargon, Stephanie, talking about splash pages and double splash pages. for those of you watching, you might not be familiar with these terms. Stephanie already pretty eloquently laid it out, but another thing that comes with script writing is being able to, especially if you're not like, you didn't go to school for sequential art, being able to pick up on those terms of like, okay, well, what's this and what's that? So I love that you kind of have picked that up as well, and have even incorporated that when you're thinking about your narrative story writing, you think about how it's going to look out on the page. So those are really cool aspects I wanted to pull up. My second question to the both of you, from a purely technical standpoint, what is your process for taking your concept and actually turning it into a script? Do you have a method in which, like, you like to have your dialogue? Is there a specific way you like to convey sound effects and actions? What are your methods in doing so?
So I wish I would have knew this early on. But now when I'm scripting, I always just write all my panels out. One that makes sure that I don't know, for me, it helps me see the story better so that I can better communicate it to whoever my artist is. And unfortunately, sometimes I don't know who the artist is going to be until I'm sometimes going through the lettering pass. And that's literally once the art is in, it could just be inks. It's when everything that the letterer has done is like on the page, and you're going through to make sure that, you know, what you've written for dialogue still makes sense and still needs to be here. But for me, it's doing the panels all the way through, because then it allows me to go back and keep in mind how much space, like how much, not even page economy, but how much panel economy I have for what I write in the dialogue. Because like I love 70s and 80s comics, but they are hella wordy, and I don't want to, unless I have to, and it's important to the story, then, you know, I'll, you know, write as much as I have. But to your point, like, this is a collaboration. So I want my collaborators' work to be on Front Street just as much as my words are. So it's always paneling first, then I'll go back and I'll do dialogue, because let's keep it real, dialogue changes until the book is printed. And then sometimes even after the book is printed, you might still have to like redo the dialogue if there is another printing of it. So that's just how it's made my life a little bit easier doing it that way.
And Natosha, how do you approach the script writing from a technical standpoint?
I'm not going to lie, I do paneling and dialogue at the same time, because if I don't, I'm going to forget. I'm going to forget what I had in mind. And so once I do get through it, like the basis of it, I will go back after that and then read through each page, each panel, be like, okay, does this work? Does this make sense? Does this need to move down? Do I need to show a little bit more action here? Is what I've written, is it going to be conveyed well in the art once the artist gets it? Or is it going to look like we just went from this to this and it makes absolutely no sense? Like, I will still go back over it with a fine-tooth comb, like, just to make sure the storytelling is telling the story. And then I do go back and I'll do sound effects last. Yes, everything else is in. It's like, yeah, we need like a bonk here, and so I'll go ahead and write SFX bonk and go through and look, okay, we need something here, just to really get it together, to really show what's happening without having to do too much telling.
Yeah. I'm so jealous, because that sounds like such a both of the way that you guys approach technical script writing sounds so easy. I am such a, like, I have to do my panels in order. I have to build out the scene like it's a movie. I have to write the description, then I have to like write in all the dialogue, then I go in the same panel. I have to write everything before moving on, and that's why it takes me forever to write.
Because if I do that too long, I'll forget. My ADHD will be like, what was that again?
What was I doing?
It wasn't meant to be written. We'll figure something else out.
That is so true. I have found a trick that I use for this. So now what I do is I write a synopsis of what I want to happen in the issue, and then I pull the scenes from the synopsis and break those down into panels. And that has helped a lot. But I really should I really should invest in doing the panels themselves, because that would save so much time.
Well, just real quick, like the way that you do like your synopsis, it's the same thing for my outlines. So my outlines are almost kind of short stories. Like that's the way that I treat them. And I try to get as detailed as possible, because then that also sometimes makes turning the thing into a script a lot easier, because I can see the roadmap very clearly. I just have to Tetris this thing and make it, turn it into a comic essentially. So no, like a synopsis and, you know, using that to build out your panels is also like the pros are doing it.
Right. That's what I do. That's like 2-paragraph synopsis for each issue. That's the outline.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
for one story, I had to just write out a chapter like I was writing a book, and it
Yeah.
made it easier to write, because I couldn't do it. It wasn't coming across the way I wanted it to.
Mm-hmm. And for those of you who may not be super familiar with some of the wording that we use, so how Stephanie said inks earlier, in a comic book is not simply just an artist and a writer. A comic book is an entire team of people, and sometimes those jobs are broken down from two people. So I think sometimes, especially when we're talking about manga, it's typically one guy. In comics you might think it's two, but those jobs get broken down into somebody who actually sometimes just somebody who makes the pencils, like just the pencil marks. Sometimes it's the person who just turns those pencil marks into permanent lines, those hard bold lines. Most of the time in modern days, that's just one guy or one gal or one person. And then there's a person who colors it, and then that job can be broken down into many different facets of flat color or engaging color. So script writing, and it's what happened? I'm sorry.
Don't forget, there used to be different artists for backgrounds in a lot of books too.
Even down to like when you're thinking scripting, when you're like sometimes as I'm sure both of you are aware, you sometimes when you're scripting collaboratively, there's even a process of that. Somebody might just be responsible for creating the prose or the outline, and then somebody else might go in and actually create the script out of that. And with that being said, I wanted to ask both of you. Both of you have probably had to do collaborative work. I know, Natosha, you work with your husband to make some of your books, and Stephanie, you've worked with a lot of major publishers. I'm sure that there was writing teams involved. How do you approach collaborative script writing with your process? Is it something that do you typically kind of work with the person that you're dealing with and see how they script write? Do you play off of each other? How do you guys approach that?
So for Nubia and the Amazons, I think that has been like the only project that I've been able to like have a very fair, like, well, not even fair, but like like how do I want to word this? Someone's actually a partner, because like I have adapted a novel before, but that I was so siloed in that. But for Nubia and the Amazons, Vita Ayala and I worked together, and because that was like my first time actually writing a comic series and a comic that was longer than 3 or 4 pages, we very quickly established a rhythm where we would outline together, which I really loved. And then because Vita wanted me to get as many reps as I could as far as writing was concerned, I would actually go out and I would script. And at that time, dialogue was still a huge trouble for me. So I would either, if I knew what I wanted to say, I would put it, or I would put in parentheses like this is what I would like the character to say, but like of course in a different tone, and this is the vibe that I'm going for. And then Vita would go back in and either write something or make suggestions to make that happen. But we kind of worked in tandem that way, which I really loved. Oh, you know what? I'm tweaking. I did have another co-writing experience with Steve Fox on an X-Men thing. It was for Marvel Infinity Comics, and we basically broke it up where we had 6 stories and we just did 3 and 3. So we outlined together. the entire thing so that all the stories could flow into one another. And then I wrote my three characters. He wrote his story for his three characters, and then we both looked over what each other wrote and either had suggestions or said this is what worked, or allowed it to kind of influence whatever we were working on that would be the next story to come after. So in both those experiences, it was just whatever worked best, but communication was always key. So it was either texting, emailing, calling, whatever worked.
And your approach, Natosha?
So with like one exception, we collaborate on pretty much all our stories. So what Lloyd and I tend to do with most of our stories is we plan the characters and the overall story together. And then we work on the outlines together for most of our stories. And then one of us takes on the writing for that story. So like The Gray, for instance, we both outlined the story together from beginning to end. We're like, oh, this should happen here. And in this issue, she should do this, all the way up to, okay, well, here's how it's going to finish this. And we actually usually start at the end and then go back. And then from there, I took on to say, okay, well, I'm going to be writing for this character. And then you can read over it and see what you think. And sometimes we'll stick to the outline, and sometimes it'll go off and another thing, and we both, and so then he'll look over it and be like, okay, I like where you went there, or okay, well, this could maybe be a little different, or do this, but write it differently, kind of thing. And then we do have the one story currently that we are writing together. I need to get to you. That's an experience. It's not bad. It's not a bad experience at all whatsoever. But it is definitely different from one of us taking the reins and the other person looking over it. I would say for the most part we agree on a lot of things, but we do still not. So what we ended up doing is we took different parts of that story, and like I did like the first quarter of the book, and then he took over from there for a few pages, and then to be honest, I actually ended up finishing the majority of it. But then we both went back and looked and just kind of read over it, and then we just discussed, okay, well, does this make sense? Should we change this? This should probably be a little different. We need to rewrite this page completely. Maybe if I wrote it and it just wasn't working, we let him rewrite it and see how it works there, just to try out some different approaches to how the story can flow, how it can make sense, how it can be what we want it to be, because it not only is the first story we are actually co-writing, the story is supposed to be a bit of a mind, so it's like, how do you write that and convey that well and it still makes sense? So it's not a bad process. The first issue is actually done, so we just need to get started on the second one.
Sweet.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I think this is probably going to be the last question in this section, specifically talking about script writing. But I'm curious, just to give some background, I want to make sure that I'm properly introducing these concepts, because again, you might not have ever written a script yourself, and it can be kind of intimidating. But typically when writing professionally as a scripter, and you're turning a concept into a script, there are rules to the game. A lot of people aren't really familiar with it, but typically when you're writing in comics, it's a kind of different when you're writing manga or if you're writing graphic novels. But if you're talking about a single issue, one little booklet of comic book stuff, the pages typically vary anywhere between 23 to 28 pages. And as Stephanie mentioned earlier, those panels can only fit so much text in them. Those bubbles can only fit so much text in them. Even if, depending on what artist or letterer you're working with, the artist being the person who's actually drawing, the letterer who actually, it's its own job. Someone goes in and writes all the words in and is responsible for the booms and the bams that you see. All of that technical stuff, you actually have to think beforehand when you're taking on the task of writing. And for you ladies, I wanted to ask, How do you juggle trying to convey all of the crazy, amazing ideas that you have in your head? How do you condense that or, synthesize that down to fit into what eventually be, this little 3x5 or 2x6 panel that has to fit on the page?
Ooh, that is something that I feel like almost changes like whenever I sit down, but um is I think that's probably the biggest reason why I always focus on the panels first so that I
Mhm.
can just visualize the story, and then from there, if I can have the character or just whatever is going on in the panel like say the thing or show the thing without me having to explicitly say it, that's always going to be the goal, because then that leaves room for me to do a lot of character development and character driven type of work, because I don't have to have my character giving exposition for something that is there, or finding interesting ways to serve up exposition, because usually when a lot of space is getting taken up in a panel, it's because it's being bogged down by exposition, so you telling versus showing, which is okay, like we all do that sometimes. But for instance, Nubia and the Amazons, I have to go back to that as an example, because this was a story where it was really important to like give people a lot of lore for these women, because you know, people kind of know the Amazons, but not really. They just really more so know Diana. So we were building up like what life is like on Themyscira and what their history, customs, and all these things were. And the way that we found to kind of do that to free up some of the space in the panels was to provide kind of like these data pages, but they were like historical pages. So it would for like the first issue or whatever, it gives a background on like what the Well of Souls is and like when how that plays a role in like for Nubia and the other Amazons and how it functions. That way, for everything else that's going on in that issue, I don't have to have characters sit there and have this stagnant conversation about the Well of Souls, what it is, what the history is, why it's important, all of that. I can, have them convey some of that, but make it again character driven, story driven, and not bog it down in the panels.
Mm, I totally agree. And for you, Natasha, what is your process of taking big ideas and turning them into, small panels?
I'm not gonna lie, Stephanie took a lot of the thoughts right out of my brain.
My
Like,
bad.
Mm.
oh no, you're good. That's perfect. It's like, yeah, exactly. My thoughts was, how do I convey this without having to put it in the dialogue
Mhm.
and log it down with expositional and words everywhere. Like we were talking about this recently when we were going over someone else's story for them because they, wanted us to read it and give them feedback. And it was like a lot of what you have in here is you're not telling the story in the pictures.
Mhm.
A lot of the dialogue that you have could have been told through the art.
Mhm.
And that's exactly it. Go back and be like, okay, did I need that line there? Or was there something I could have shown instead to get that across without the character saying it? Is it overly expositional? Because we need exposition because in some way, shape, or form, we need to have exposition so people know what's
Mhm.
going on in the story. But how do you get that exposition across? We just did a 20-minute YouTube video on this exact topic. It wasn't supposed to be 20
Mhm.
minutes. But like, yeah, how do we show without telling, or how do we make it interesting? Or for my example would be with the Gray, because it's a sci-fi-esque story and she's a scientist. So I can't always show all the science jargon. Sometimes she's got to say it
Mhm.
Right.
so that you can understand what's happening. So it's like, how do I get that across without feeling like I'm throwing a bunch of random words at you on the page? And
Mhm.
so I've had to rewrite lines a couple times. And even in some of the printed stuff, is like, I feel like that was still a little bit much, but you know what? It's not as bad as it was. So it happens. But yeah,
Yeah.
essentially, how can I
Ab
show and not tell?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought up your review process and taking a look at somebody else's work, because we're definitely going to go straight into editing. Now, assuming that you're not familiar with the difference between script writing and script editing, it's totally fine. Editing for comics is much like editing for traditional books. It is sometimes a different person on the team. Sometimes, depending on, especially in indie comics, it has to be done by the person who does it. But the work of an editor, I always say, peer review is the best review. It is somebody outside of the story who receives your script. Sometimes that script has already made it to art, but it is what it is. um, but it is someone outside the story who receives your script and gives constructive criticism. Sometimes it's just grammar. Sometimes the editor can be like a very nitpicky person and can actually help you find plot holes or different issues within your story. Editing is a critical, and I do mean critical, part of making good comics. I'm an advocate for a good editor. So I wanted to ask you ladies, in your experience, and this is kind of more of an anecdotal piece here. What is a time in your script writing experience where either as the editor you had to tell another individual, "Hey, we're gonna have to cut this back," or is there a time in your own writing experience where your editor had to have a heart to heart with you and say, "This ain't it, chief"?
My very first issue of again, Nubia, because so many lessons were learned. That first script I turned in it wasn't, my editor will say that it wasn't hot garbage, but I felt like it was. But it was essentially because I didn't know how to pace. I wasn't sure like how to pace correctly, and also just story beats and making sure that I was hitting them. So I really appreciated our, come to Jesus moment, because I learned so much, and of course was able to apply that to subsequent issues. Like, my favorite editors are the ones that are not trying to tell you how to do it, but instead just giving you a little bit of guidance, suggestions. Like, they can feel the heartbeat of the story, so they're just helping you find the pulse, basically. Those are my favorite. I have edited some comics too, and those are tough conversations, because I know for me personally, at first I used to take, revisions and editor notes personally. They hurt my feelings, because I was like, well, damn, I was really trying. But now it's now I don't take it that way at all. I'm not writing for a grade or anything like that. Like, I'm writing comics. It's fine. So my editor is there to help the story be the best that it can be, and for me not to be out in the world embarrassing myself. So those conversations that I've had with individuals, either about pacing or letting them know, like, hey, you got hella plot holes. So, like, what are you trying to say? Like, this character, if you don't want them to, for instance, be like a stereotypical naggy mom, how can you incorporate her in the story where she has agency herself, which will help you, deter from that. So just asking, whoever the writer is, questions about their stories. Because sometimes when you're in the thick of writing, like, you can't see the forest for the trees. And it takes that person with a pulled back view, who isn't close to the story in the way that you are, to see things in a full scope, and hopefully give you the information, or actually the questions, and make the suggestions that you need to really bring that thing together, because first drafts are ugly. They're supposed to be.
And for you, Natasha, I'm sure you have so many stories.
For
But
sure.
for you, editing wise, or being the editor, or having someone edit your work, what are some of your experiences in that vein?
I wish everyone was as understanding as Stephanie.
That's why editors love me, and I get work because of that. Like, you gonna let me do my job? I'm gonna let you do yours. But I'm sorry,
Right.
continue.
No, I wish everybody realized we're just trying to help make you better. But as to not call anyone out, I'm gonna stick in house. Talk about my husband, which of course I edit for Soul, and he's well past this point now, but he was writing Soul issue 4, and which is not out yet, but will be soon. and he was struggling. He was having a hard time with about halfway through the book. And he finished it though. He finished it and he gave it to me to review. And I was just like, this page right here, this part right here, it's not working. It's not working for me. I'm reading it and it quite frankly, this dialogue is stupid. Stupid and it's corny, and you need to change what that says right now. And honestly, at the end of the day, he couldn't think of anything. I ended up making the dialogue change for him to something much better. We both agreed that it was much better. And that's that's the line that stuck instead of what he had before, because it just wasn't working. It didn't sound in character. It was it was very corny, which the character is not a corny character. I won't say like super serious. He is serious in a sense, but also knows how to chill, but the line it wasn't working. And I had to tell him, look, it's not gonna work. I need you to change that. Yesterday. Not now, but in the past. I need that to change because I hate it with every fiber of my being. Now, I don't talk to other people like that when I edit their stuff. I don't say I hate it and it's stupid because he's my husband, so I could talk to him like that. But like other people, I would just be like, honestly, I'm not feeling that. It doesn't quite work with what you're trying to convey. Let's try to think of a different way we can say this. You can say it nicer to people who don't know you. So that was one time. Yeah, it was really, thankfully we're past that now. Yeah. And then I love what Stephanie said about seeing through the trees, because though I do kind of self-edit, I prefer to have that second set of eyes as well. So whether it's him, whether it's someone else that I get to do a read for me, I need someone else to look at it. And there have been times where it was just like, not quite. And growing up, I used to take a lot of things personally in general when it came to like feedback or criticism, because people sound harsh, and I had to grow up and get thick skin. It is what it is. But sometimes it still kind of stings because certain stories are really personal for you. So, of course, with my most personal story, that's where I take the most offense when people say stuff. And so I had to pull back and think about it and look over, and it's like, maybe that doesn't work. It's not. And the crazy thing is, because it had actually got released already, there were people who were like, oh yeah, I got it. But I was like, well, how do we make it so that even if the story isn't for the person, they still get what I'm trying to convey? And so back to the rewriting table I went. And that was the one where I had to like write it as almost a novella real quick to be like, okay, I got it. Now I can write this properly. So
I absolutely love the fact that you both brought up kind of the curse of being an editor. And for a lot of you that are viewing this, you're probably your own story writer. You probably aren't the person sitting in the editing seat. The curse of being a good editor, if this is something that you would want to pursue professionally, is being able to be critical while also being able to be empathetic. Because no matter how you slice it, no one wants to criticize. No one wants to be the person being criticized for anything that they do. That's just what it is. Especially if you poured a lot of time, a lot of heart, like this is a story that you've been dreaming of. The characters have been living in your head rent free since you were like 10 or 15 years old. And all you wanted to do is bring these characters to life. It can be really, it can feel like a personal attack when someone is telling you, well, your character doesn't make a lot of sense, or your story doesn't make a lot of sense, or this feels like a child wrote it, because oftentimes you were a child when you wrote it. And that's okay. I feel like the best thing to do is be prepared to be a little heartbroken, but definitely take the criticism in stride. And as definitely what Stephanie said, you cannot see the forest through the trees. Sometimes, you know, you can't see them, you can't even see the mountain. It just all kind of looks like a wall. So if you want to be able to see the landscape of your storytelling, the best thing to do is to take a step back. If you don't have an editor, you know, put the book down and definitely walk away, or definitely have someone else peer review it. I feel like it'll produce a better product overall.
If nothing else, beta readers are great.
Absolutely.
I totally agree. Well, ladies, we've hit on some amazing aspects of script writing and editing for comics. We've talked about a lot of things technically, your own personal ideals and processes when it comes down to script writing. But I think I'd like to just hear some of your tips. A lot of the people who will be watching this are very new to comics and sequential art as a profession and as like an arts form. What are some of your tips and tricks that you implement when you are approaching script writing or approaching editing for projects that you're working on?
So for script writing, you have to write the thing. I don't know how else to tell you that, because ideas are great, but they're just simply ideas. They aren't anything that others can experience until you mold them into something, which would be that script. So please, like, it doesn't matter like how inexperienced you are. Like, I'm self-taught, like I didn't go to school to script writer, any of that. Like, these are things that you can learn on your own. There is a wealth of just free stuff online that you can check out, or if you're at conventions, you can actually get scripts from writers. I'm going to start selling my scripts at conventions, but I still like collect scripts from other writers. When I worked on Absolute Power, like, I got some Mark Wade scripts and I like some things he implemented. And now I'm using some of that technique in what I'm doing now. I'll even get screenplays from folks with their selling them at conventions to just kind of expose myself to other things. So expose yourself to a lot. If it's comics, my biggest tip would be to immerse yourself in whatever those comics are. You will be surprised what you can pick up through osmosis, to be able to kind of, yourself get a feel for story beats and whatever it is for anything from superhero comics to horrors to sci-fi, westerns, whatever. Just fully immerse yourself into the thing that you're trying to do, because it's no better way to get better than to have more reps. So whether that's reading, writing, whatever, do it. Like, it's not sexy. You just got to do it.
Absolutely. For you, Natasha.
I think she got all the script writing tips out. That was perfect.
Mhm.
On the other side, I'm going to say, please be open to criticism. We know that it's your baby. Like Ty said, you've been dreaming of this character since you were 5, 12, 20, but there's always room for improvement. And I promise you, when we talk about, why your character may not be as interesting as you think they are, or how they can be better, that we only want you to win. It's not trying to tear you down. When we ask in-depth questions about your character, it's not trying to make you look foolish. It's trying to make you think how
Mhm.
you can make a better character and write a better story. Because, for sake of conversation, I must legally say that this is just an example that I'm pulling out of my head. If your character can't die and has all the powers of everything and no one can beat them, how do you write a compelling story? And I'm not saying you can't, because I've thought of compelling stories that can be written around a character like that. But you have to think of how to make the character compelling. You can't make a Superman level character and then just have the bank robber villain of the week and think it's going to be an intriguing story for people. You
Mhm.
have to think you have to think broader. You have to get creative. And that is all we want from you. I promise.
Mhm. I certainly agree. And my advice to any new to both new script writers, adapting concepts into comic book scripts or into a story, as well as editors. Um, I learned this when I was in theater. Actually, it's one of my favorite things that I ever learned in theater. Is imagine your project in your as a little baby bird, and imagine someone crushing it, and imagine you have to do it with your own hands. Sometimes that is what projects are. They are just ideas. They are infants. They have no legs. No matter how powerful you think they are, crush it. Crush all your dreams. And that's okay. It's okay that they get crushed. You can always build them back up. Your ideas are plentiful and as vast as the sea. You will come up with new ideas. And of course, don't be afraid to be a risk taker. And as Stephanie says, I highly agree. You have to do it. You cannot create comics by thinking about create comics. The only way for you to create comics is to do them and to actually create them by writing them. This was a fantastic panel. I loved every moment of this. This was so fun for me. But I just wanted to take a moment in time. I know we kind of talked about some tips and tricks, but do you have any last thoughts? You guys shared some amazing gems already, but do you guys have any last thoughts that you'd like to leave with the audience? I'll also leave this time for you guys. I'm sure we'll see you again throughout the day, but where can we find your work as well? Leaving the opportunity for you to plug yourself.
So my tip real quick, if you want to, I don't know, like write for the big two, you absolutely have to be able to take criticism. Even not even the big two, just writing licensed comics, period. Like you have to. I've written things that were great. And then someone came in from marketing and thought that I had to change like custom comics. Headache. But you take it in stride. It's their IP. You do what it is that whatever adjustments have to be made. And then you get called for the next thing and it's fine. But you can find me on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Blue Sky. So on Blue Sky to search Stephanie Williams. For everything else, Steph_I_Will. I have a newsletter now called Press Start to Story. You can subscribe to that. Just go to my social media and you'll find it in the bio.
Wonderful. And for you, Tashi, any lasting tips, or you can plug yourself as well?
Listen to your editors. I just cannot stress this enough. I know it wasn't that, but we can't stress that
I will agree with that too, though. Listen to your editors. We only want the best for you.
I promise.
Since my brain's broken right now, I'm just going to say that we are also on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, though we don't use it very often, and TikTok. You can find us at Midnight, and Facebook. But you find us at Midnight X Comics on most of those, or just Midnight Comics, midnightcomics.org. As Ty likes to say, Google me. And then you can also find me most everywhere at official_TOSHIJ, or just TOSHIJ without the official underscore part. No, it never came back to my brain, so well.
Oh, it's okay. You have dropped so many amazing gems in this in just this time of the panel. And of course, do not look away. Both of these lovely ladies will be in panels throughout the day. I believe Stephanie will be live at some point. So I don't know when you're watching this, but Stephanie will be live today as well. So you get an opportunity to ask her questions live. And yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning into this panel. Again, it was creating a script and editing for comics, and we'll see you around. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching.